right, back on Balls in the Air with your favorite host from the world of podcasting. Well, I hope so anyway, Charlie Rymer, and got a great show today. Nick Sherburne, who is a founder of Club Champion now with 86 retail locations across the country that got started back in 2010. And Nick, welcome to the show. You're sitting here, you got 86 stores now, Club Champion. When you got going with this, and I know you were in the business before 2010, but did you ever think you'd get to where you guys are now with the 86 stores?
No, no. I mean, it's awesome that it happened, but the reality of it is I started this business when I was 16 years old. And so, 2010 that was 98. And so fast forward to 2010, we had 2 locations, and I was a young fella and I met some people. We were kind of talking about before we got on this podcast, you meet so many great people through golf. And I met some people that opened my eyes to maybe something that we could do greater and really take what I've done here and expand it across the globe. And, kind of at the time was like, well, maybe we could do 20, 25 of these. Well, 11 years later, we're at 86. So I guess we're going to just keep going, which is great. More people we can touch, the better.
Well, I've been in quite a few of your locations, and it really is an amazing experience. I'm spoiled, always have been in the world of equipment, having had access as a PGA Tour player to the tour vans and that sort of stuff. And when I go in one of your stores, it's to me just exactly like the experience I get when I would walk in a PGA Tour van back when I was playing this game for a living, and bringing that experience to a lot of people is something I thought would never happen. But it's amazing to me how fast the technology has changed. When I was a kid, my teaching professional, master PGA professional, Dean Alexander's had a long career in this business, a lot of different places. And we're still close to this day, but I started with Dean when I was about 13 years old, and he loved doing club repair. And Nick, you're not even going to be familiar with this because I played Persimmon up till 1996. But we would go in and refinish my driver, and the club repair shop in the back of the golf shop in Tegakay, South Carolina, and and strip it down and sand it and repair. I mean, I can remember taking like clay and making a little dam and filling in with epoxy, the places where the persimmon had been chipped away. And I was so picky with that driver. I wanted to keep it in great shape for as long as I could. I wouldn't hit normal range balls. I'd always have 2 or 3 balls that I had in my bag, because I didn't want the sand on a range ball to mess up the persimmon. And I think from where we were then to where we are now with golf club repair, golf club construction, with the fitting, everything that goes into it, it's amazing how far we've come as an industry in such a short period of time.
Just so you know, one of the first things I learned in club repair was refinishing wooden woods. In fact, we were so slow the first couple of years back in the late 90s. What we were doing, we would take old clubs of people's and refinish them just like it. Till this day, we still have folks bringing clubs that they want re-whipped. Remember the whipping on there?
Oh yeah, I could never do that. I was the worst at whipping.
And with 400 employees now, I am still the only employee that knows how to do that. So when a customer comes in, they're like, this was my grandfather's club or this is my dad's club, and I want to put it in my office. Can you re-whip it? And they all come back to me, and then I go into the build shop and do it. And people just kind of look at me and they're like, you still do that? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I can still do that. So
it's just so cool seeing those old clubs. I played, I was with Arnold Palmer Golf for a while, a company that was first started as First Flight, and then it became Arnold Palmer Golf, and it was in Chattanooga, and they had this process that's called densitize. I remember it was somehow they would put clubs in vacuum chambers, and some kind of oil would get, in theory, get sucked into the persimmon, but they actually there was a persimmon blight like in the mid 80s, and they like cornered all of the persimmon blocks. And they always had the best persimmon. And the guy who would do a lot of Mr. Palmer's clubs would do a couple of drivers for me. And I would go down, the old factory was down right off the Tennessee River in Chattanooga. And it was just so cool. It smelled like a furniture factory in there, the veneers and the varnishes and all of that. But Mr. Palmer, it would be like beautiful persimmon. And I always like to have a color that would not cherry and not natural, but somewhere in the middle, getting that color just right was always cool. But he always took his clubs and he'd go straight up black with them. And they would paint over the insert line, or not paint over, color over the top of it. So in fact, I've got a driver at home now. It's still in pretty good shape, but it's black. And it was the same way they made it for Mr. Palmer, black on top, and you couldn't see the insert. It wouldn't pop at all. It was like it was the coolest club. And that's the club I played on tour till 96. But there's something about that old stuff. I really miss that.
Well, it's just a whole different, but it is kind of cool. Like, what we're going to talk about today is, it wasn't that long ago that's what you played golf with.
Yeah.
And, now it's like, rocket science to it a little bit. I'll make it a lot easier. And I think people make it tougher than it needs to be, but it is pretty amazing to see how far this industry's gone in a short period of time.
Well, one thing I know for sure, every now and then I'll go back and I'll hit some of that old stuff just for kicks. And if you go back and hit an old persimmon driver, and I've got a bag of them at home, you better go back and hit the old real Bellata golf ball, like a 384 Titleist golf ball. And they sort of match up. If you try to hit a modern, even a tour ball that we think of as being sort of softer now with a persimmon, you find out really quickly that it's not very soft. I mean,
not very soft, might explode the club. There's a lot of, yeah, you're better off trying to get like an old wound ball for that.
Yeah. But it's fun every now and then to go back and hit all that stuff. So, and it's fun to reminisce about all that. But the reason I asked you to be on the show, and thank you for coming on, is this weekend I was playing a member guest, and we had the format where there's 5 9-hole matches, and it's a lot of fun because you get to meet a lot more people. But one of the opponents that my buddy and I had in our match, he asked me, he said, "Charlie, how do I keep up with what's going on in golf?" He goes, I want to have new gear, but I don't even really know how to dig into figuring out, is there stuff that's newer than what I've got? What's coming down the pipeline? And I thought, that's a great idea for a show to try to help people sort through how to stay up to date, find out if there is anything out there that can help them. And so that's why we called to ask you to come on the show. So how would you go about answering that question?
Well, I know you didn't bring me on for a commercial, but to me, that's the whole premise of why you come to a Club Champion. It was, you kind of even said it perfect right at the beginning. And I'll take you back to my history of when I was younger in high school and starting this business. I also worked at the range at Cog Hill, Western Open. I'm sure you played in it. And I would watch folks like you go to these trailers and tweak their golf equipment and do all this little stuff. And I was amazed by it. And I was like, well, wait. If the best players in the world are doing this, why isn't the average person getting this? And so that's kind of how Club Champion came along is I found out that there's just so much out there, and it's not super digestible unless you're very into it. In fact, I even found, and you can probably talk to this more, a lot of tour players didn't even necessarily know. They just had these technicians that would go, they would say, hey, I'm having trouble hitting this shot or having trouble hitting that shot, or, I feel like I lost some distance. And then these technicians would take over and tweak their equipment to get the shot that player was looking for. And so Club Champions kind of always kind of escalated since that. It's like, can there be a place that takes the unbiasedness of just selling you something out of it and let science and, whatever launch monitors that came along, all this, prove out what you should play, and not let marketing or your buddy who might be a better or worse golfer tell you a magazine article that could be paid for or not, explain to you what you maybe should buy and not buy. And so, long story short is, the whole premise of Club Champions, you come in and we look at it. We go, here's your launch, here's your spin, here's your club head speed, here's the variables that can be changed, here's the variables that are, or the things that are fixed, the constants. And we can help you marriage that. And because, again, I just don't think you can just go out there and research a bunch of stuff. I think you'll get confused. My personal opinion.
Yeah, it is definitely confusing. And here's one of the things I love about Club Champion. And we discovered, and this is no BS, I'll just cut right to the chase, but we discovered, I guess it's been 2.5 or 3 years ago, when Nike decided that they were going to get out of the golf club business. And they had some players that might have had a year, 2 years left on a contract. Those players were now free to play whatever equipment they wanted to play. And it was really interesting to me. You got a player that's getting paid to play a club that doesn't exist anymore. Go play whatever you want. Some of them would immediately go to a manufacturer and get a full lineup out of one manufacturer. But most of them said, I'm going to cherry pick what's out there. I'm going to find the best driver. I'm going to find the best wedges, the best putter, the best irons, the best fairway metals, best utility. And that's, to me, when we sort of saw who has the best club. And you might see the combinations I saw were like a tailor-made driver. You would see a lot of Mizuno irons. You'd see a lot of Scotty Cameron putters. You'd see a lot of Bob Vokey wedges. You'd see sort of this mixed bag. What you guys do at Club Champion is that you're not in bed with one particular manufacturer, whether it's the club heads or the shafts or anything else. And that's pretty amazing opportunity for the average consumer to come in and be able to truly cherry pick and get the best of the best.
So I think what a lot of golfers don't realize still to this day, and something we preach is, there's limitations on this equipment that, the USGA or the RNA have put on these manufacturers. So clubs can only do certain things, like they can only have a certain amount of speed off the face. They have limitations. And so then you have your swing and you have limitations, right? So, we all have this different swing.
No, you're telling me that we have limitations as golfers? I'm not buying it, Nick. I'm not buying it.
Well, we do. And we have it. So, and a lot of people don't think about it. It's like we all have different swing paths. We all have different attack angles. There's a lot of variables in those. So, until you get in and you see what your body does, or like how your body reacts to certain equipment, you're never going to know. And so, but what I was starting with, and I'm going to circle back around now, is, so if we have you and your club head speed and your swing, and we know that the club can only produce another thing, which is this certain ball speed, we now know where you are and how good you can be. And so it's all just numbers. And so we can educate you about the numbers of going, okay, based on how fast you're swinging, are you getting the ball speed you should? Once we get you that ball speed, or try to get you as close as technology can get you to the optimal ball speed based on what your club head speed is, can we get it to launch the way we need to launch? Not everybody needs to launch it high. Not everybody needs to launch it low. And so there's these imprints we put you in, but once we get in there, it is what it is. We can show you the equation and go, this is the best it can be, and there's no getting better. And I don't think a lot of golfers get that. And that's what we try to explain to them is technology is great, and you can read about it, and you can go on forums, and you can geek out about it. And believe me, I do those things. Mm-hmm. But I also know how to weed out what's good and what's not. And I always tell people still to this day, the fitters, we train all our fitters here, and I'm part of that process. I talk to customers. I try to talk to customers like I'm talking to my dad. My dad's a 9-hole golfer, plays 9 holes 3 times a month, loves golf, but just a 9-hole golfer, maybe watches a little TV, reads a magazine at the doctor's office. Other than that, he's not going to understand all this stuff, which is why I'm on this podcast today. And so, us being able to get in there and educate you on, these things that are, this is how good a golf club can be for you. Let's see how close we can get you there. And you're never going to do that unless you go into some place that does really good fittings and has a lot of options.
So my opponent from the member guest this past weekend that's curious about it, I would suggest to him get in a Club Champion, or I've been a PGA professional myself, find a PGA professional in your area that does a lot of fittings, right? Because it seems like the more you do, the better you're going to get at it. But it's really something that's I'm not going to say impossible, but extremely difficult to take up on your own, thinking, well, I'll just go in and try this off the rack and this off the rack. That's really just hit or miss, isn't it?
It's 100% hit or miss. It's, that, and I totally agree. You got to have somebody, you don't have to go to a club champion, and not everybody can go to a club champion, but you have to go to somebody who's done a lot of fits, because there's no university for club fitting. And there's certain things we know, but at the end of the day, only doing lots and lots of fits is how you get really good, because you get to see all these different swings, and you get to see all these different types of ways of hitting a golf ball, and you can't translate that through a textbook. So anyway, you got to go do that. And then I always say, you got to go somewhere that has a lot of different stuff to test, because, you go read about this equipment. This one says, oh, this will launch higher. This one will launch lower. This one will spin more. This one will spin less. Yes, that's what they set out to produce, and that's what they want that product to do. But as you know, as a PGA professional, with all the different attack angles and club paths, that's not going to always happen for every golfer. And so that's why you have to have those different things to test to see if it truly works for you.
Last time I was in a Club Champion, and you guys have a new store here in the Myrtle Beach area. I went in for a fitting. It was a lot of fun, and I'm sure I'll butcher this, but the combination of different clubs and heads and shafts and grips was something like 86,000 that they had like right there in the store that I could try, theoretically that day. And I might be a little off on my number, but I don't think I'm too far off, am I?
No, you're actually high. I mean, we state 55,000, but we are north of that.
Yeah.
But that's what we state. It's a lot. And people go, well, that's overwhelming. The big thing about club fitting in general, I think people get overwhelmed. They're like, there's too much. I don't understand it. It's expensive. It's, I'm not good enough player, all these things. And no. I tell people, I go, we have all those options so that we have something for everybody. Because we are going to have to deal with a lot of different swing types, a lot of different speeds, a lot of different everything. So you have to have all these products in order to dial in certain golfers. And also you want to have price points because not every golfer is going to want to spend the same thing. And so, I always tell people, I go, the demo option is awesome, but don't get scared by it because that's why you have a really good fitter that's going to take you through a journey of hitting just a select amount of those based on what that fitter needs to solve in your game.
So let's talk about the investment without getting into specifics of cost. Is it possible to come in a Club Champion and say, hey, listen, I love this game. I played it a long time. I've read about what you guys do. I believe in it. I want to go through this process, but I can't go in and get 14 clubs right now. I mean, can you get a fitter that'll look at your bag and say, all right, this driver, it's got whipping on it.
Yeah.
and let's just maybe rotate through maybe over a 2-year or 3-year period. We'll end up getting you gear that's a lot better for you, but you're not taking the hit all at once. Is that something that you guys do?
100%. And I've said this for the 20 years that I've been club fitting and had this business is you don't have to come in committing to buy anything. What you have to commit to is the fit. And, at Club Champion, we charge a fitting fee because you're going to get a full-time fitter that's been doing this, that's highly trained. We have the best training program in the business. Plus, you're going to have the best launch monitors. We use TrackMan, the Sam Putt Lab. Plus, you're going to have the demo selection we talked about. And by the way, we don't sell brands. We sell performance. So it's about what works. And so anyway, long story short is I tell people, you just have to commit to the fit. And you're going to come in, you're going to have this great, awesome experience. We're going to learn more than you ever thought you were going to learn. We're going to feed it to you in a digestible way. And at the end, you're going to have a blueprint. You're going to have this build spec that shows, okay, driver's perfect. You can't do any better. Leave that one alone. 3-wood, let's maybe put a new shaft in there. Irons, we got to get all new irons. Whatever it is, right? It could be tweaking something. It could be getting all new something. It could be leaving something alone. But you'll have this blueprint. And then you can decide. You'll also see the price of all that, and you can decide to do some of it, all of it, or none of it. I mean, that's the beauty. Just pay for the fit. But at least you'll know what you're giving up, right? And so that's where I tell people it's hard to put a value to something until you know what you're going to get out of it. And so our whole goal at the end of the fit is to show you very simply, here's how your clubs perform today, and here's what they could perform like whether we, leave it the same, tweak it, or get all new. And now you can put a value to that easier and decide what to do.
So 2 days ago, I was playing golf here in Myrtle's Inlet, South Carolina at the beautiful Caledonia. And they have these really super cool fox squirrels there. You ever even seen a fox squirrel? They look, it's an odd looking squirrel.
I think I have actually.
Yeah,
wondered what it was. Somebody told me.
Yeah, and they're like friendly. They look more like ferrets and squirrels, and they come over and people will feed them, right? And I was like messing with one right by my cart, and I didn't have any food, and he got mad and he bit me. Can you see that right there?
Yeah.
So I'm out there and I'm like looking up, on my phone. Am I going to get rabies or am I not going to get rabies? And all this sort of stuff. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to get all of this, these shots, and it's painful, and and all this sort of stuff. And I think a lot of people, they got a medical problem or something like that. They start doing all this research online. They find out all this information. And then that happens to be, there's like a doctor out there. And I went over to the doc and I'm like, oh my goodness, so you're going to have to cut it off, And he's like, you're going to be just fine, And I'm like, I'm thinking about every time I go to the doctor with something, I do all this research and I go in and I think I've got one thing. And it's like, I either don't have that, I'm perfectly fine, or I've got something else. So a client coming in to one of your fitters, is it best for them to do like I do and get on whatever the version of WebMD is and read all?
Yeah, I was going to call you the WebMD.
Or just come in blind, and see what you guys say.
Well, I got a lot of doctor friends through the years that are clients, and they call them the WebMDers, the people that come in just like that. And I'm guilty of that, by the way, too.
Right.
But in my world of club fitting, I call it the golf WRXer. And the person that goes on the forums and goes down these rabbit holes, which, by the way, I'm guilty too. But
hard not to.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we love golf. We want to consume golf content. That's what we like. So I tell golfers, it's fine. Go do it. I do it. But here's what you just keep a filter, right? Like, it's like, you can learn all this stuff, but don't take it all to heart, because the reality of it is you shouldn't even listen to me if I were to tell you something like that, because what happens is I'm going to tell you the same thing I've told clients for years. They text me and they go, hey, Nick, you've known my swing. You know this. Can we just build this driver up and go? And I'll be like, well, we can, but it's still a risk. Like, there's no point in it when you have these great launch monitors. Now you have great fitters and you have these demos. Why wouldn't you come in, test it, make sure that we are getting the proper ball speed, launch, spin, shot shape we want, and then we build it? Because that is just, it's that accessible now. And it's, why wouldn't you? To me, if you're going to go out and buy a driver, and I mean, most drivers off the shelf now are $400 to $600. Why wouldn't you spend a little on a fitting fee and make sure that the investment you're putting in that is, sound, good money spent. So good money invested.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about some of the trends. I'm 53 and I've lost, just through natural aging and eating too much fried food here in Myrtle Beach. I would say my club head speed has gone from 118 to probably 106, 108. I mean, something like that in the last 5 years. And so I've gone to a little bit lighter, a little less stiff. And so when I ask buddies that are, or buddies that are ask me that are my same age, I always say, hey, you know what? I go to, a little bit lighter. Like I've always played a 125 to 130 gram shaft in my irons, and now I play like a 110. It's always been an X, and now it's an S. And I'm sort of wondering, am I making a mistake by suggesting to my buddies to try a little lighter, a little less stiff, because everybody's got such a different swing? Is that a trend that you see working for people and in the direction that we're going with equipment? Or is that just something that's working for me and I'm telling my buddy, hey, try this?
There's a couple thoughts I have on that. The first one is, I don't think you're doing anything wrong, because I think people looking, none of us are getting younger. Okay. So as you move in your golfing career, your speeds are going to change, the way you load the club, your transition at the top, whatever. There's a lot of little moving pieces, as those things change. And so you might need a different product. To your point, you might need a different weight of shaft. You might need a different flex of shaft. You might need a different torque of shaft. And, to keep up that speed that you have. So, if you're going from 118 to 108, listen, your ball speed, everything's changing. You're going to have to change something. Otherwise, you're just going to lose tons of distance. Or you can try to keep up with distance a little if you have the right technology to marriage it. So I tell folks, it's like, there's no silver bullet, right? Like, you're right in the bucket of, odds are clubhead speed's going down. We might need lighter. We might need softer. That could happen, but you want to test it. And that's what you have people do. Because I see folks all the time. In fact, I talked with another PGA professional all the time about this, where he's like, I see really high speed players that sometimes do really good with a little bit softer flex shaft, maybe not go down in weight, but flex. And I said, absolutely, because they don't load the shaft, even though they have a lot of clubhead speed, they don't have a lot of load. Their transition's a little slower, some of this stuff. They don't need to play a super stiff shaft, even though their clubhead speed kind of suggests they do. And so that's why you go in and you test it and you make sure, because there's no perfect answer until your body swings it and you see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I've always just thought all tour players played with X. I mean, that's what I always played with, and heavy and X. And I see players like Lee Westwood, who's actually been playing some really good golf this past year. He's never hit an X shaft in his life, and it does have to do with loading. I always thought he was crazy. Now I'm a little bit older and I can feel the difference. I'm like, man, I wish I had tried a little softer stuff earlier in the day.
Well, you didn't have the technology that these guys have. I mean, I think everybody back then, there was no like launch monitors were, not really a thing. You didn't know. So everybody was like, this is what we think we should play. And honestly, we still fight that to a degree of, sometimes these younger, better players are like, they see, the best players in the world playing something. They think, oh, that's just what I should play. And it's like, no. And you're starting to see that revolution. You talked about it. The Nike was a perfect where you saw these folks branch out and start doing things differently than they had done it in the past. And I think you're going to continue to see that, out there by the best players, which is great. It shows the golfing public, like, not everybody fits in a bucket. Like your swing is a snowflake, and you got to have clubs that fit it.
Yeah, and in particular for me, I'm almost 6'5", slightly over 250, slightly, maybe way over that. But fitting has always been a challenge for me because the stuff would get like way too heavy when I played an iron shaft that was 3/4 of an inch or sometimes an inch long. It would just be an incredibly heavy club. And so I didn't like the weight. So I'd always play shorter than maybe what I should have. Now you can dial it in where I can get the club as long as it wants without it being ridiculously heavy. The options are really almost unlimited. And especially if your folks are using a resource like Club Champion. But I want to finish with this without even talking to you ahead of time about this. I'm going to assume a big part of the business at Club Champion is the driver. I would guess percentage wise, it's pretty high because that's where most people focus. And then, folks want to get irons and then they maybe get into wedges and hybrids and all that. And I think the last part would be my assumption is the last thing they get into is the putter. And yeah, I mean, it's just, we want to hit the ball farther. We want to hit it straighter. I don't care who you are. You want to hit it by your buddies. You want to go in and see a fitter. And the first thing your buddy's going to ask you, hitting any farther, and that's human nature and that's great. But in this game, best I can tell, putting is still very, very important. And I would always talk to people about if their goal in golf is to lower their handicap and shoot better scores, you better pay more attention to the putting, and having a putter that fits your stroke is really, really important. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on the golfer might be watching this and they're focusing on the driver, which is great, but you guys do a lot of great work with the putters as well.
Well, so putter's my favorite thing to push because it's 40% of your game, and you're right on. I mean, the best players in the world, and when you were playing, you knew putting was going to be one of the biggest differentiators between you and the field. And for me, I call it the gateway drug at Club Champion because people get scared about club fitting. Well, putter fitting is not a super long fitting. It's not a super expensive fitting. In fact, it's our most economical fitting. And it's something that can instantly change your game the next round. Like, you can get new clubs, it's going to change your game, but you're going to see that over like an average where you can start making putts tomorrow with the right putter. And so, for us, it's like, we use Science of Motion Sand Putt Lab, but you come in and we analyze your stroke and then marriage a putter to it. Now, you may have the proper putter, but it's not set up with the right loft, the right lie, the right weight, the right length, the right grip. And so we tweak it. We may say, hey, you're in the completely wrong putter. This putter has too much toe hang. It's not opening and closing correctly. You're not squaring it up. We need a different putter. But it's awesome. The feedback we get in every study we've ever done, putting just, if you're not getting your putter fit, you're missing a huge opportunity to score on the golf course because it instantly can make you better your next round after a putter fitting.
Well, putter business to me is always been a tough business because not only, let's say you've got an innovative putter or some sort of product that has something to do with putting, whether it's a shaft, the grip, whatever, you're not competing against what's in the marketplace right now. You're not competing against just that. because you're competing against all the putters that somebody has in a garage somewhere too. Because, you know, if you go back and look at a Scottsdale Answer or a Scotty Cameron Newport, they hadn't really changed all of that much over the years. And you can go back and, you know, grab the magic one and get a couple of days out of it. And that's why I think that putter business is something that's pretty fickle, I think, for the manufacturers.
Well, and here's some fun things that I like that manufacturers, and listen, we sell manufacturers. I still say it, they don't like it, but it's true. You can paint them all black. They don't care about the name. I mean, that doesn't matter. Like, there's face bounce putters, there's 30-degree toe hang putters, there's 45-degree toe hang putters, there's 60-degree toe hang putters, there's 90-degree toe hang putters. There's putters with little offset, putters with no offset. The name doesn't change. That's not going to be what makes you more putts. What makes you more putts is marrying some of those characteristics I just talked about, getting the proper loft in line. The name doesn't matter. And I also love when people are like, well, this one feels great. I'm going to tell you right now, cool stat, go into a golf shop, put earphones in and, put, blinders on, you wouldn't hit putts. You wouldn't know one putter from the next. Because sound is what creates feel. And so when you see all these different inserts and mills and all that, really a lot of what they're trying to do is create a different sound, which creates a different feel. And guess what? That could help you, but that's going to be the smallest part of making sure a putt goes in the hole. All those other characteristics, toe hang, offset, loft, lie, weight, those are the things that are going to make a difference when you actually make a putt. And so I always tell folks, you can go research, you can have fun doing all that, make it your own putter. But at the end of the day, if you don't have those things right, nothing else matters.
That putter that feels great today, I've had this happen quite a few times. 2 days later, it's at the bottom of the pond out in front of number 9.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to ask you one of the trends, because this is something I don't understand myself, but I'm seeing it a lot out on tour, and I haven't used it. The shaft that's composite on top, metal on bottom, or vice versa. I know it sort of started out. Bubba Watson played that old True Temper bi-matrix shaft that was a composite of steel and graphite and two distinct segments. I'm seeing a lot of those on tour. What's going on with that putter shaft?
Well, you're seeing a lot of different putter shafts. So the one you're speaking of is like you see a lot in Odyssey putters. That's their Stroke Lab. Then like Louis, you've seen him. He has one called Stability by BGT, which is Barney Adams' company. Yep. And then you're seeing like Dustin Johnson and some of these guys playing what looks in Bryson. That's all graphite. And so what you're seeing in this putter shaft technology is the next kind of jump in putters. And what their attempt to do is to create less torque in the putter shaft. And people go, well, less torque in a putter shaft. I mean, we don't really bend a putter shaft. You're 100% correct. We really don't. Although you can get softer putter shafts that do bend a little when you putt. But the idea is with this tighter torque is a couple things. One is your putter has a small sweet spot. So if you get a little off and you get a little, wiggle on that head when you don't hit the sweet spot, that's throwing off your ball speed. It's throwing off the direction the putt's going to start. And so when you have these putter shafts that, are more stable, less torque, and you get a little off, you're going to get less deflection. You're going to get more consistent ball speed on mishits, and you're going to get less, more on line. The other thing that's interesting about those putter shafts is torque can fool the mind. And so when you have less torque in there, what it's doing is it's making the putter feel freer. Like you feel like the head's just kind of going back and through, and it's kind of your natural stroke. You're not fighting the shaft, if you will. And you probably don't even know what that means because you probably never even realized you did. But if you were to go to like a store like a Club Champion or whoever has, or selling these things, we do, we'll have you hit a putt with one putter that's the two identical putters. One has one shaft, one has the other. And you're like, holy cow, side by side, I can feel that difference. And it makes a difference.
Yeah, those things on top of that look really cool too. Like a lightsaber.
That helps too.
Yeah. I lied to you. I said that was going to be my last question. One more thing popped into my mind. Back last century when I played this game for a living, there was like 4 different grips that you could use, for all your clubs. And then there was like 3 different putter grips. And I was always fanatical. I'd have my grips changed probably 3 or 4 times a year, and it had to be the same guy do them to get them, get them all lined up. Because I always like the reminder. I don't like round grips. To this day, I don't like round grips. Nick, are you still there? Did I lose you?
No, I think I'm still here.
Okay, good. Our video went a little sideways here, but I'll just keep going since I believe we're going to be audio only. But there was probably only the selection was minuscule, and I would have them changed out 3 or 4 times a year. Same guy, same day of the week. You know, I mean, you get crazy when you're a golfer, but I would also every day, even for practice, I would have my grips clean. I either do it myself or get my caddy to do it. And I had to use a cheap stolen hotel towel that was like really ragged, you know, not the cushy, fluffy ones, but the ones that are, you know, that are worn. And then it would have to hand dry outside, not in the air conditioning, because I had to have that exact feel every time I played golf. But when I look at what's available with grips now, the putter grips, all the different models from the manufacturers and grips, that's almost, I mean, we could do a whole show almost on that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just so much
big impact on performance.
Yeah, well, that's your connection to the golf club. And the other thing about grips people don't think about, they all these different materials and stuff weigh different things. So, you know, weight of that grip is going to dictate other things about how that golf club goes. So, you know, that's the big part of what we have to, you know, put in the equation. Not only do you have the right size, you know, everybody just gets concerned with feel, and then after feel, they get concerned with size. Well, feel is up to the customer. But what I want is to make sure you have the proper size in order to get the club back to the ball square and with the most speed. So you can play with size to create speed hindrance or speed it up, and to create shot shape. So, you know, larger grips to smaller grips will allow your hands to do different things. And so, you know, having a club fitter that can help you do that is huge. And same with putter grips. I mean, putter grips are now, you can go ginormous to small. Like back in the day when I started, everything was like a small little putter grip. And, you know, having that putter fit, because people are like, oh, I want the big grip, it's going to take my hands out of it. Well, guess what? Some people need their hands.
I'm in that camp. I can't stand a big putter grip.
Right. So yeah, that's why you go get club fit. They all are great. There's so many good grips out there. You got so many choices, and you can really make your clubs look cool too. But you got to make sure you got that right size, because as you spoke, you don't know a PGA Tour player on the planet, or LPGA Tour or Senior PGA Tour, that doesn't scrutinize over their grips, because that is their connection to the golf club.
Yeah, we're fanatical about it. I had one of my dad was in sales. His very best customer lived in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and I loved him. He's still around. His name was Howie Moss, and Howie would, a really good player. He was a basketball player at University of Tennessee, and loves the game of golf. Lifetime scratch golfer, and he's fanatic about sunscreen. And he'd always come, you know, when I'd play in a tour event in Greensboro or anywhere that he could drive to, he'd come up, and he'd always come up on the first tee. And he's like old school. He wants to shake my hand, and I'm looking at that hand, and it's just slathered in sunscreen. I'm like, I just couldn't. I'm like, hey, I give him like a fist bump or something, because I've had some problems with skin cancer, and I used a lot of sunscreen. I put on in the locker room, and I have to wash my hands with soap and water. And then once I've done that and I'm going out to play, I don't want to touch anything that's going to put any kind of oil or sunscreen or anything like that on my hands, because then I know it's going to get on my grips. And that was always the biggest, you know, the funniest moment, because I really needed to shake his hand because he's my dad's best customer, but I just couldn't do it. But that gives the folks that are listening an idea of how fanatical professionals are with how their clubs feel.
They're one of the easiest things to do to your golf clubs is have the proper grips put on them, and making sure that you have somebody that you know, a fitter that can show you the size and what you should be doing. But it is amazing how many times people come in and I see the grips on their clubs, and I'm like, how are you even swinging these things?
Yeah.
Because that is your connection. And these things are slick as can be, or whatever they are. And you just don't realize how much it impedes you until you get it done and you have somebody scrutinize over it.
Right. And every now and then get a wet towel and just wipe them down, just scrub them down. It takes 5 minutes to do the whole set.
Yep.
So, that definitely will help out. Well, Nick, this show was all about one question from someone I played golf with and a member guest this past weekend. They want to learn more about the golf equipment, what's new out there. I appreciate you providing the answer. The answer is find a club fitter that you can rely on, and start by taking a look at what you guys do at Club Champion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.